Hey guys, how's it going? Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thank you so much for checking out another one of our super cool studio gear reviews. Today we're taking a look at a very cool bundle of plugins from the guys at Izotope. This is RX7, which is all about audio restoration, okay? So this is a really interesting and incredibly useful bundle of plugins that are designed to repair and correct lots and lots of technical issues within audio. Now this is great for a ton of different applications. I use it first and foremost as a mix engineer, actually. You know, I get a lot of different songs and sessions from clients who may have recorded in great studios, but they may have also recorded some of their tracks in a bedroom or in places that aren't necessarily ideal for recording vocals or instruments. And you know, whenever that happens, we always, of course, try to do as good of a job as we can when recording whatever it is that we're recording. But for a lot of people, you know, they don't have an ISO booth, they don't have acoustic treatment, so maybe they're just recording in a bedroom or their living room or something like that. And we've got background noise, we've got room tone that isn't necessarily what we want in the recording. All these kinds of issues can crop up. Also, for people who aren't as experienced in recording, sometimes maybe you've driven the preamp a little bit too hard and there's some clipping going on, or you don't have a pop filter and there's plosives, all this kind of stuff. That's where RX7 really comes in handy, because it's a whole set of tools that are designed to help correct all of those issues. Remove room tone, remove and repair clipping, all this kind of stuff. There's a bunch of different tools within it. We're going to look at some of the most useful ones. In terms of recording music, or working with vocals or acoustic recordings or whatever, that's really not all it's useful for. I also use it a lot doing video work. So, you know, let's say you've been out in the field, you're making maybe a documentary or something, and you've gotten some interviews with somebody at a particular location, and there was, you know, again, background noise, room tone, anything like that. RX7 can really come in handy there as well. And then, of course, if you're doing voiceover or just really any kind of vocal anything, there's just a lot of amazing tools that don't even necessarily cover like repairing or restoring audio like declipping. We also have some breath control and some mouth noise control plugins in this bundle that are going to help you just get the best possible vocal tone you can. If, you know, maybe your mouth was a little dry when you did a voiceover pass and you've got some of that mouth noise going on, there's tools in here to look at all of that. So to do this review, you know, I was kind of sitting here thinking, well, you know, should I try to dig up some old files from clients that maybe weren't recorded great or something like that? And I just thought, you know what? A lot of these tools are really designed to work best on the human voice, and I do a lot of voiceover, so I decided to go ahead and record 3 different takes, you can see them here on screen, of myself reading a small excerpt from a script that I wrote for a travel film. Now, I did it 3 different ways. In this first file, you can see it's called Room and Noise. I backed way off the mic, opened the window, turned on my AC unit. So not only is there a lot of undesirable room tone, there's also a lot of background noise. So we're gonna see how using our De-reverb and de-noising plugins can help repair that signal. In the second one, clipped and plosives, I got way too close to the mic, took off my pop filter, and just overdrove the mic like crazy. So it's clipped, there's a bunch of really bad, you know, plosive clipping and distortion and stuff like that. So we're gonna use De-Plosive and De-Clip to try to repair that audio. And then finally we have this breath and mouth noise, where I basically just tried to breathe way too heavily and smack my lips and stuff way too much, and intentionally create a file that had some of those features in it so that we could see how the deep breath and de-mouth noise plugins in RX7 work. So yeah, we've got a whole little set of files here that have some pretty serious problems, and we're gonna see how RX7 takes care of all these different problems and learn about each plugin in the process, okay? So let's start with room and noise. Okay, this is our first track. And again, for this, I just backed way off the mic, way further than you should be. And this room that I'm in here, I'm in my little mobile studio here in Bangkok, and it is pretty echoey. Whenever I do voiceover here, I set up kind of some blankets to help isolate things. But if I back way off the mic, you can definitely hear a lot of room tones. So let's just see how the basic file sounds. Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores. The calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a 2-stroke tuk-tuk engine. So you can hear right off the bat, we can even give it a little bit more gain, but you can hear right off the bat we have a lot of room tone, you know, kind of reverberance from the room, and also we have the AC running, the windows open, it's been raining today, so you can hear a little bit of that in there. it's really just no good overall. And if I were recording this professionally, certainly, the first thing we always want to do is make sure that our recording environment is as good as it can be. But let's say somebody has sent me this file, or maybe I recorded it out in the field somewhere where I didn't have control over the acoustic environment. That's where RX7 can really do some amazing things. So, the first thing that we want to do is denoise, right? And we actually have two different denoising options that come with RX7. We have voice denoise, which is obviously for vocal applications, and then we have spectral denoise, which is more for musical applications. So maybe you were playing an acoustic guitar in a room that had some background noise. You would use the spectral denoise for that, but we're going to go ahead and use the voice denoise. So there's basically two modes that these denoising plugins can be run in. We have adaptive mode, or we have learn mode, okay? Learn mode is always going to be a little bit more precise. Adaptive mode does a pretty good job. It just kind of uses an algorithm to try to figure out what's noise and what is sound. So just opening it right up, we can hear, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a two-stroke tuk-tuk engine. It's a soundtrack that underscores what most... It does a pretty good job, but what we can do is we can kick it over into learn mode. And then you can see I've got a loop region right here over just a blank spot in my recording that has some of the noise in the room, right? And so when I click learn, it's going to listen to that noise and learn it. And as soon as we stop, that learn thing shuts off, and here we have our noise profile. We have an optimization option for dialogue or music, and then we can either have a surgical EQ, or excuse me, a surgical filter, which is going to be a little bit more precise, but can maybe have a little bit more artifacting, or we can have it be a little bit more gentle, which might not remove quite as much room tone, but it also is going to sound a little bit more natural. So I'll leave it set to surgical for now. The sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees. So you can hear already right off the bat that's removing a lot. Here it is without. Punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a two-stroke tuk-tuk engine. It's a soundtrack that underscores what most consider coveted moments. So it's helping a lot already. Now, of course, we have threshold, which is you're basically using that to tell the software, what the threshold of the noise in the room is, where you want it to kind of start looking in terms of dynamics for that room tone. And then you have the amount of reduction that it's applying. So if we crank the reduction way up, it's going to remove more noise. That can also lead to artifacting. Moments of relaxation, of rejuvenation, of escape. Moments well spent. And on this tiny, remote Andaman island, this soundtrack is all but inescapable. So you can hear it on the tails of the words. You kind of have, you hear this little bit of sort of digital garble, so to speak. Regardless, using these tools, you can really dial in exactly how much noise reduction you want to do. So I think, setting it right around somewhere in the middle usually sounds pretty good. And on this tiny, remote Andaman island, this soundtrack is all but inescapable. But it's not the only thing you'll hear here. Oh, not by a lot. Obviously we can push it way too far, but I think maybe about 60% on the threshold, somewhere around there. And then about the same 60-70% on the reduction. The sounds of island life is going to give us the best result. So already that's helping a ton. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's definitely a lot more usable now than it was before applying that. Now, the second thing that we're going to want to use here is our De-reverb plugin, which is going to help to remove some of that room tone, okay? So opening up De-reverb here, you can see this is a bit different. Now, we also have a learn feature here, so if you can isolate some of the room tone or natural acoustic reverb and do a loop, just like we did with the noise reduction, you can. This one I tend to find works a little bit better in adaptive mode when we're not really using that learn function, because it can be really hard to isolate that individual little kind of reverb profile. But we can tune quite a bit in terms of, is the reverb in the room more high frequencies, is it more low frequencies, and we can adjust this reverb profile here. The sounds of island life. To help a lot with that. So obviously you can hear right now it's pretty extreme, it's doing a lot. The sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores. And you can definitely hear some artifacting, right? It sounds a little bit digital and garbled. So we'll just push back the reduction. The calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a two-stroke tuk-tuk engine. And we can kind of tune this reverb
It's
profile.
a soundtrack that underscores what most consider coveted moments. Moments of relaxation, of rejuvenation, of escape. Moments well spent. And on this tiny, remote Andaman island, this soundtrack is all but inescapable.
So, right there, we've got it pretty well dialed in. We've got our voice denoise, we've now got our de-reverb, and I kind of dialed it into the profile of the reverb in this room, which is a lot of high mids and highs. It's not as much lows because it's a pretty small room. So, you know, reduction set pretty low because we don't want to go crazy with it. But you can hear, especially if we listen, here's before, here's with no RX7 processing.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a two-stroke tuk-tuk engine.
And then when we kick it all in,
it's a soundtrack that underscores what most consider coveted moments.
It's a lot better. You know, it's doing a lot and it's helping a ton with the overall quality of the sound, and it's got it back to a place that I would really consider usable.
Moments of relaxation, of rejuvenation, of escape.
So, you know, it's great. It's really amazing what these plugins can do in the context of kind of repairing your audio if things, you know, again, didn't go as well as you would have hoped in the recording process. You know, they can be real lifesavers. And from a mix engineer's perspective, you know, tons of times I've gotten vocals that are great vocal performances from people, but they were recorded in a room like this. There's, you know, an AC or a heater or cars or something in the background, and, you know, there's a lot of room tone, and I want to use my reverbs and have a lot of control. So by using these plugins and really spending the time to dial them in, you can save a lot in terms of the quality of the signal. So let's take a look at our second clip here. This is the clipped and plosives.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a two-stroke tuk-tuk engine. It's a soundtrack that underscores...
So you can hear on a lot of this, like on this word underscores.
It underscores what most...
We've got some pretty bad clipping. We've got a number of really bad plosives.
The calling of exotic birds, the...
Right there on the word birds.
Exotic birds, the rustling of...
We've got a really nasty plosive. So we can do a couple of things with this. We have, first of all, declip. Now, declip actually manually repairs clipped intervals or clipped transients, which is really amazing. So here we have some very simple settings. We have this threshold, and you'll see when we roll audio.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Wave.
This kind of waveform shows up, or the spectral analysis of the amplitude of everything, and using that you can really dial in those clipped transients. So let's go ahead. I'll start bringing it in.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a two-stroke tuk-tuk engine.
So right there, you can hear it sounds a lot better. All that clipping is basically gone, and it has this fun little 3,528 clipped intervals repaired, and that number just goes up as you run it. But we also have quality, low, medium, high. You know, if you have to get really extreme, you can bump that up to high. Although that is really more designed for like not real-time processing, so that's something that you would want to apply, get it sounding good, and then bounce the stem down and put it back into your session, because these plugins do take a lot of processing power and can add a lot of latency. So they're not really something that's meant to be used with tracking, or even with like just as a normal plugin as a part of your mix flow process. They would be applied, you would get it sounding good, and then bounce the stem down so that you can remove the plugin, because they are very processor intensive. You know, it takes a lot of power to do what they're doing. But there's, you know, declip doing an amazing job, and then we can bring in De-Plosive here. Again, very simple. Frequency limit is kind of, you know, is going to help it focus on what part of the frequency spectrum it's looking at, which plosives are usually very low frequency things. You know, they're a big spike in air pressure. And then strength and sensitivity. So let's hear how this helps repair our plosives.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly. The calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a two-stroke tuk-tuk engine.
So that's helping quite a bit. You know, those plosives, unfortunately, because of the nature of what a plosive is, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to repair it flawlessly. But it does help a lot in reducing kind of how shocking it can sound. You know, a plosive, as the mic diaphragm is swinging all over the place with that air pressure, it definitely helps to lessen the extremity of it and can help to save the audio. Now, this is going to be perfect because, as you can see in the waveform, like here's one of the plosives right here, you know, nothing's really going to be able to bring that back. But what this plugin does is that if it's a small plosive, it'll repair it, and if it's a bigger plosive like the ones here, it'll just help to smooth out the response, right? So there you go. Here we've got our super clipped and distorted one.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated...
And here it is without.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a...
So you can hear it's a lot cleaner with the effects on there. You know, it's cleaned up quite a bit of the clipping, it's cleaned up quite a few of the plosives, at least made them a little bit less obtrusive. So that one taken care of. Now in this final one, and this is going to sound really funny because I was doing it very intentionally, and we're going to look at this breath and mouth noise recording, okay? So here it is without anything.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuated briefly by the distant thrum of a two-stroke tuk-tuk engine.
I flubbed it a bit there because it's actually really hard to talk wrong and try to intentionally have too much breath noise and mouth noise and stuff. You have to really focus on... It wasn't easy, so I screwed up a couple of times, but it is good enough to demonstrate what we've got going on here. So breath control is the first plugin that we will look at, and this basically is just designed to, you know, do exactly what it says on the tin. Control those kind of breathing artifacts. If you've got a singer who's real breathy, you know, they're inhaling a lot in between words, or, you know, they have words that are getting kind of washed out by a little too much air, kind of a thing. This can help with that quite a bit. So you can hear right at the beginning,
ah, the sounds of island life.
Like at the end of Island Life, you know, I kind of have a lot of breath on that. So if we bring in deep breath,
ah, the sounds of island life. Waves
and you can see it kick in right on that word, and it's going to bring in some of those top frequencies. It almost is kind of like a funky de-esser, but it's really going to help to repair and take out some of that excess breath noise.
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white...
At the top of the word waves, I kind of did, and you can hear it's helping that.
Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds...
That breath there in the middle, you know, you saw it kick in and repair that a little bit. So that's definitely helping right off the bat. And, you know, you can set target level, which is how much it's more or less going to bring down those breaths by. Sensitivity, obviously, sensitivity to that frequency spectrum where your breaths are occurring. But the other one that we can use here is this mouth declick, and this is a really interesting plugin. Depending on your singer, you know, you can adjust these, the frequency skew and click widening. What exactly those do, I'm not 100% sure, but basically you just kind of tune it to where it sounds good with your particular vocalist. So,
ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds...
So right there at the beginning of the calling of...
The calling of exotic birds, the...
If we listen to it without the plugin...
The calling of exotic birds...
You hear that I do right at the beginning of the word.
The calling of exotic birds...
It immediately removes that, essentially, and makes it a lot less apparent that that's kind of what happened. So, you know, again, here it is without...
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the...
A lot of mouth noise, a lot of unnecessary breathing, and when we apply these, it darkens the top end a little bit. We can always go back in and fix that with EQ after the fact, but...
Ah, the sounds of island life. Waves lapping gently against powder white shores, the calling of exotic birds, the rustling of trees, punctuate...
And And you can hear it's a lot cleaner. It helps to clean up that mouth noise. It helps to clean up the breathing a little bit. And we could even, there's a couple of less intense plosives in there as well. We could very easily use the De-Plosive plugin and remove those as well. But, overall, suffice to say, it's really amazing what these plugins can do. I hope I've demonstrated it here okay for you guys. I use them all the time. I find them incredibly useful. Again, especially like where I use them most of the time is just when people send me stems to mix and something didn't go right in recording and I need to save a vocal take, or I need to save an acoustic guitar take, or voiceover or something like that. I also use it anytime I'm doing work on a film, either sound mixing or if I'm doing a filming project of my own, and interviews or sound out in the field, there's noise that I don't want in there. There's so many amazing plugins in this bundle that you can use to repair all this kind of stuff. It's very, very amazing what they've been able to do. Now, I do know that RX8, I think, is coming out soon. They just released a new version of Ozone, so I would assume that a new version of RX is well on its way, if it won't already be released by the time this video comes out. I'm not 100% sure. And I'm sure it's only going to get better, as time goes on. Their algorithms and their processing only gets more and more powerful. But the guys at Izotope, I absolutely love them. I use Ozone all the time for my mastering. It's an incredible mastering suite. Neutron 2, also their whole visual mixer thing in Neutron is fantastic in terms of being kind of an all-in-one channel strip for doing really surgical correction on channels. They just have a lot of incredibly innovative plugins and plugin bundles and stuff that I find really impressive. They really are not at all into the cloning thing where they go, oh, we recreated an LA2A compressor perfectly. All of the stuff from Izotope is just incredibly revolutionary. It's very forward thinking, it's very modern, it's all their own designs, and it all sounds great and is incredibly usable. And they're doing a lot of stuff that I don't think any other companies out there are doing. Now, of course, there's other companies that have audio restoration stuff. I mean, Waves has their X noise and X hum and all that kind of stuff, which are fine. I have those as well. But RX7, man, it has worked some miracles for me in the past in terms of being able to salvage a take or to salvage an interview or something like that, And I get clients all the time who ask, all they need me to do. They don't even need me to mix anything. They just, maybe they filmed a lecture or something for a college or a convention or whatever, and they just send me the audio from that and say, hey, this is a great lecture and we want to put it on our YouTube or distribute it or whatever, but we just need it to be cleaned up. There's a lot of room noise, there's a lot of ventilation in the room, whatever. Is there any way you can just make the speaking a little bit clearer? And it works absolute miracles for that. I mean, you can do some crazy, crazy stuff. Very, very impressive. So if you guys need this kind of plugin, if it sounds like something you're interested in, I think that RX7 is the best bundle in the business right now. I think it's absolutely the best thing that money can buy. To buy the entire bundle is a little bit pricey, but through Splice, you can subscribe to it monthly. I think it's about $15 a month. That's how I do it. And Splice, it's part of Splice's rent-to-own program, which I love that they're doing that. So in the next year or so, I'll have that totally paid off, and then I'll own the license for it, which I think is awesome that they're not just doing an ongoing monthly thing, and instead they're allowing you to kind of rent it to own. So very, very cool there. It means it's very accessible to a lot of people. It's not astronomically expensive. So RX7, 2 thumbs up, love it, use it all the time, and if it sounds like something you guys would get some use out of, I think it is excellent. But those are my thoughts. What are you guys' thoughts? Do you like RX7? Have you used it? Is it part of your workflow when dealing with these kinds of problems? Do you have other plugins or bundles that do this kind of stuff that you prefer? Whatever your thoughts may be, leave them in the comments down below. As always, if you have not yet subscribed to Consordini's channel, please do so. We greatly appreciate it. Click that notification bell to be kept up to date with our new videos. If you want to give this a like or a share, that would be great as well. But in any case, my name is Alex Scott with Consordini.com. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.